Hello and welcome back to Burning Questions. My name is Mbali, and today I have an amazing guest, Nicholas Lorimer, who is part of the fan team. Mr. Lorimer, welcome to Burning Questions.
It's very good to be here, Mbali.
Thank you, sir. All right, guys, let's get into it. So today we're talking all things voting, basically, and coalitions and so on. So I think let's start here. How many people actually voted in this past municipal elections?
The number was quite low.
Hmm.
The It was 46%, I think, of people who actually registered to vote. However, of people who are eligible to vote but didn't even bother to register, if you include those people in the calculation, then the number is much lower. So what we
Mm.
really saw was the majority of South Africans disengaging from the electoral process this time. A lot of
Yeah.
people just didn't bother to go out and vote.
Yep, that is very true. Do you think, just a quick question, do you think that's what will happen in 2024? I think we're going to have another election.
I think I think this is one of the great questions of what's going to happen in 2024 is
Mm.
those people who are sitting on the sidelines, do they get involved? Do they vote for a particular political party, or do
Hmm.
they stay off on the sidelines? I think chances are that turnout will probably be quite low,
Mm.
but you never know. A lot can happen between now and 2024.
And 2024, definitely. Alrighty, fam, let's get into the question of the day, which is, it should show up just now. My system is malfunctioning. There we go. So the question is, can coalition governments work in South Africa? So I think let's start as what is a coalition government? I think just maybe give us a definition.
Right. So when political parties in a system like ours are elected,
Hmm.
sometimes they don't have enough. So each party gets a certain percentage of the vote, and then in our
Hmm.
system, generally that means they get a certain percentage of the seats in whatever it is, whether it's the city council, the provincial legislature, or the parliament.
Hmm.
And if no party has 50%, which is what you need
Hmm.
to elect your mayor and pass your budgets and things like that, you need to form a coalition. You need to get other parties to join you in voting for your candidate in exchange for something. So this basically means a coalition government is where a bunch of parties get together and say, okay, we're going to form a government. So it won't be let's say, an ANC or EFF government. It's going to be an ANC and EFF government. And
Mm.
the two
Okay.
will work out a deal by how that's going to work. And there's a lot of different ways that deal can be worked out. It's up to the parties involved. And sometimes there's something called a supply and confidence agreement, which is where the party says, okay, we're not actually going to be in your government, but we'll help
Hmm.
vote for you in exchange for some priority that we're interested in. And then there's others which are true coalition governments where you actually put people from the other parties in your government. So let's say that this was
Mm.
happening at a national level. Let's say there was an ANC and an EFF coalition.
Hmm.
Maybe the president would be Cyril Ramaphosa, and then they'd make Julius the deputy president, something like that, right?
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I think I get it. Yeah.
So we've got a lot of them after our last election.
Mm-hmm.
We had an enormous number of municipalities where in South Africa, the ANC, which used to sort of dominate huge parts of the country, has dropped below 50%. And that
Mm.
means all of a sudden there's opportunities for other parties to band together in coalitions to push the ANC out of government and form new coalition governments. So
Mm.
even though the ANC is still getting like 40% or 35% in a lot of these municipalities, they don't
Yeah.
have the votes to form a government without the help of other parties. And that means if the other parties band together, they can push them out. So
Yeah.
that's a
So
Yeah, sure,
yeah,
go ahead.
I live on Twitter. I live on Twitter, and I've been seeing like most of these political parties don't want to go into coalition with the ANC. Like none
Yeah,
of them
uh,
seem
that
interested.
yeah, and that's something that we're going to see have to be resolved in the next couple of days. But I think that's because they're the big party; they've been in power for a long time, and they seem to be going down. And so a lot of parties are not interested in joining together with them because they think it'll also drag them down in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. You can't want to work with the problem.
You can't go into the election telling your voters, "Hey guys, we're definitely going to get rid of the ANC in government," and then say, "Oh, well, actually, no, we're going to join them and help keep them in government." It
Yeah.
doesn't really work. Doesn't very work very well. You're going to get clapped next election.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I think let's
So,
get into the question. Can
so
coalition governments work in South Africa?
yeah, so this is an important question, and
Mm-hmm.
the answer is kind of, well, they have to.
Mm,
So at both a national level and a provincial
mm-hmm.
level, and also at a municipal level,
Mm,
uh, we have a system that makes it very easy for small parties to get a couple of seats. Some
mm-hmm.
countries, like the UK, they have what's called a first past the post constituency system. That means if in a certain area a political party gets one more vote than another one, they get 100% of the seats in that area,
Mm,
right?
okay.
In each constituency. South Africa doesn't have that. We've got I don't want to go into all the details now, but basically, we've got a system where if you get 5% of the vote, you'll usually get around 5% of the seats
Okay.
in whatever it is, and that
Mm-hmm.
means that we are going to it's actually very unusual to see parties getting above 50% in a system like ours. There are countries with systems much more similar to ours, the places like the Netherlands or Germany, and there
Mm,
they never have a party that gets more than 50% of the vote. And I think now that's been the aberration in South Africa, is that we've had a government that's gotten more than 50% of the vote for a long time now.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
all signs are pointing to that not being the case in the future, which means that coalitions are here to stay and they're probably
Mm,
never going away. And so
okay.
it's absolutely vital that we work out how these things should work. And a lot of political parties in South Africa don't have a huge amount of experience with coalitions. There's a lot of personality differences between the parties. There's a lot
Mm,
of differences in ideas.
yeah.
I often hear people say stuff like, why can't they just work together? Well, because they have very different ideas about how to fix the
Yeah.
problems, ideas
Yeah.
which are the opposite of each other. And if you don't, if you don't iron out those differences or find some way to make compromises, which usually leave both sides unhappy,
Mm,
you're really not going to come out. You're not going to be able to work together. So it's a very
yeah.
complicated business making coalitions. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, if we want anything to function in South Africa going forward, we're going to have to work out how to make coalitions work.
Yeah. So are you saying it's gonna have to be a trial and error thing? So now they're gonna have to toy with our lives. It's
Yes.
about to get interesting.
Yeah, so if you are the kind of person who watches politics, the next couple of years are going to be really interesting. Like I
Yeah.
said, the recent elections produced a huge number of governments which will require coalitions to form.
Mm-hmm.
And that means there's going to be a lot of trying out things, a lot of signing documents here and there. In 2016, the last municipal election, we also had a bunch of coalitions, and
Mm.
they really didn't work well at all,
Sure.
unfortunately.
All
Um,
right.
there was, if you followed the news at all in that time, there were people fighting in councils and things like that. It was good TV, but it wasn't very good for the country. So,
Exactly, because that's my main fear. It's just that we are going nowhere slowly. So they're gonna be toying with our lives now. We are going to be an
so
experiment for them.
the good news is that it can work once you work out how
Mm-hmm.
to do it. Countries
Mm-hmm.
like the Netherlands, countries like Germany have shown that once you learn how to do coalition governments, they can work
Mm.
quite well, actually, and they make sure that a lot of different voices are represented in government, not just one party.
Yeah.
And they can be a very powerful tool for enhancing democracy.
Yeah, definitely. No, I just hope that, but looking at South African politicians, I'm not meaning to jinx it. It's gonna be very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think part of what's going on here is I think voters are going to see a lot more from their politicians. It's going to be much easier to see whether your politicians are actually making choices that you want them to make, whether
Mm,
they're doing the job that they promised to make, because coalitions require you to be a lot more active on your feet and looking
yeah.
for opportunities to get wins for your voters. So I think if South African voters are paying attention, they'll have a lot of opportunities to judge people they voted for and decide whether they should or shouldn't vote for them again.
Definitely. Mr. Larimer, let's get into the quote of the day. So today's quote of the day comes from Chris Harting, and it reads: as the few political connected leaders of the given revolution gain political power, they use it to entrench their own interest and the interest of those they favor. exacerbating inequality and leaving the majority of citizens in a state of hunger and poverty. What do you think of this quote? And I think it goes well with what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a danger of when people promise political revolutions, they get swept into power. This has happened not just in South Africa, but in so many countries around the world. Politicians come in, they promise to change a lot of things, and people give them a lot of power that people perhaps shouldn't give them. And the temptation is then very strong to use that to benefit yourself. And of course, a lot of politicians do. And the end result of that is that their people suffer. And so I think this quote from Chris is a really good one for reminding us that we need to be careful of people who promise to change the world, because sometimes if they have too much power, they can do very bad things. And that's, I think, exactly one of the things FAN is about making sure that individuals have power and that the politicians don't control our lives.
Yeah, definitely. Mr. Lorimer, I think that is where the show will end for today. Thank you so much for coming and helping me answer the burning questions. And you at home, remember the show is every 6 p.m. on YouTube, IGTV, and on Facebook as well. Remember, your freedom is worth fighting for. See you guys next week.